Hello and welcome back to part 2 of the holding tutorial. In this part we're going to look at how do we actually enter into a holding pattern. In the previous part we explained the different areas of the hold, how do you actually initially draw it when you get the ATC clearance, and the second step will be to determine the entry or how exactly are you going to get into the holding pattern, and this depends on your position. But before we go to this step, I would like to introduce first the three entries. How do we actually fly it in the aircraft? And so I'm going to say in holdings we have three types of entries. There are three possibilities or three ways in which we can get into a holding pattern. The first one is the easiest, which is called, the first one is the easiest and it's called the direct entry. A direct entry, from the name it suggests that you directly enter the hold. We'll explain how is that done. The second one is called a parallel entry. Yeah. The second one is called a parallel entry. And the third one is called the teardrop entry. Or sometimes they call it the offset entry. So it's teardrop, sometimes called offset entry. Alright, so let's start explaining one by one. Okay, missed an arrow here. This is for the outbound. Okay, so assuming the aircraft is our airplane we're going to fly is coming from this direction. So the airplane is flying this direction and it is excuse me, we're going towards the VOR. And so how do we determine how do we get into the holding pattern from this position? Well, if we look at it from a general perspective, if the aircraft is coming from this direction or this direction, actually, or from here, in any place from here, in this large sector, in this large area, if the aircraft is coming from here or here or here, anything from heading 020 to heading of 200, we go into a direct entry. So this major sector, so this sector here, is a direct entry. If the aircraft is coming from this here or here or here, then we are supposed to enter in a direct entry. Now, how do we actually do that? Well, assuming the aircraft is coming from here, let's work on the easiest position first. So the aircraft is flying from here and we're going to the VOR station. Once you're over the station, once you are over VOR, Charlie Victor Oscar, all you need to do is to start turning right to your heading of 090. We said that let's color code it so it is easier, like the previous one. This is the outbound and this is the inbound. So all what you need to do once the aircraft is flying towards Charlie Victor Oscar, so the aircraft is going towards Charlie Victor Oscar. Once you're there, all you need to do is to start turning to the right, as we said, the standard rate, and fly the outbound leg for 1 minute. Now, when do we start timing? 1 minute is exactly when you are abeam the station. We explained the beam in the previous part. So all you need to do is, for a direct entry, fly direct to the VOR station. Once you're over the station, start turning right, and once you're abeam, start counting 1 minute. Sometimes the entry might be the turn might be a little bit more than 180 degrees. In this case, it's going to be a little bit more than 180 degrees. You might get a beam before you are actually finished your turn to a heading of 090. It doesn't matter. All you need to, in timing wise, you need to always start the clock when you are abeam the VOR. Even though you haven't finished a turn yet to heading 090, you might be still turning. Start the clock once you are abeam, so you can have an accurate distance or an accurate timing for the outbound leg. And once you do that 1 minute, then start turning, and the hold continues normally again, 180 degrees of turn standard rate, and fly the inbound leg for 1 minute and continue in the racetrack until ATC instructs you otherwise. So the same thing implies if you're coming from this direction here, the same thing. You go fly direct into the VOR. Once you pass over the station, start turning right to the outbound heading, which is 090, and count 1 minute when you are abeam, turn right and fly back into the VOR station for the inbound leg. This is a direct entry. The direct entry is one of the simplest. Actually, it's the easiest of the three, and it is a very straightforward approach. So, when do I know if I am in a direct entry? Is when you are in the largest sector. So it's like from heading 020 to heading 200, you are still in the direct area zone. So if you find yourself, the aircraft is situated in this sector, you assume always right away that it's going to be a direct entry, which is the simplest way. Alright, let me clean it up and we start explaining the next one. Again, let's get this a little bit, move the dots. Okay, I'll pause the video, and once that's done, I'll continue. Okay, so that was the direct entry. Now we move on to the parallel entry. The parallel entry is if you are coming from this direction. In this direction, we call in this large sector. This sector from heading 020 to heading 270, it is always a parallel entry. If you're coming from this direction here, or if you're coming from here, to this direction. And if you're coming from anywhere in this sector, it is always a parallel entry. So the largest sector is direct. The second smallest sector is the parallel, and finally is the teardrop, the smallest one. But let's first explain the parallel entry, how it is actually done. Alright, so let's assume the aircraft is coming from this direction, and as you know, the hold is supposed to be into the right turn, so we're actually coming almost the opposite direction. So what you do is, in a parallel entry, is you fly direct into the VOR, as we did in the proceed direct into the station, like we did in the previous entry, the direct entry. So you go straight ahead to the VOR station. Once you're over the station, you turn to a heading of the outbound leg. So you fly, once you pass the station, the second step to do is to fly a heading of 090. So it's like you're coming here into the VOR. Once you're there, you start turning to a heading of 090, exactly like the outbound leg. So you are flying parallel to the outbound leg. So that's why it's called parallel entry. You fly, once you pass over the station, second step to do is to turn left and fly a heading of 090. This is a 090. It's the same heading as the outbound. Heading of 090, parallel. So you're actually flying parallel to the outbound leg, hence the name parallel entry. Now, for the times, once we pass over the station and turn left to heading of 090, you start timing once you stop the turn. So let me get it a little bit more clarified. So if I am flying this way now, we are flying a heading of 090 in here, 090. Once we are 090, we start timing from this position. We start timing from here. Once we are actually passed over the VOR station, we finish a turn, we time, and once we are heading of 090, we time 1 minute. And we continue. Once the 1 minute pass, we start turning again to the left and come into intercept the inbound the inbound course, and proceed direct to Charlie Victor Oscar. Now, as you can notice, I drew this and I overshot the inbound course because the distance between you and the inbound course is too small for you to make an accurate it doesn't finish from one turn. You have to take it. Once you start a turn, you will find yourself overshooting the inbound course, and we will speak that more detail in the part 3, part practical. You will find the aircraft. Once you finish the 1 minute and you start turning left, you'll find the aircraft overshooting the inbound leg. Once you do that, just once you pass and continue the turn, make sure that you get onto the inbound leg as fast as possible, and we will explain how we do that in practically when we fly with the airplane itself. So once you pass the 1 minute, start turning to the left. You will overshoot, but as quickly as possible, come back and re-establish the inbound leg, re-establish the inbound course 270. And once you're over the station, continue the hold normally back again. And this is how a parallel entry is done. So just to make sure you get the parallel entry correct, we come parallel entries from any heading from this sector. So heading 020 to heading 270. We are assuming in this position, for example, we come fly, proceed direct to the VOR. Once we do that, we start turning to the left to fly parallel to the outbound leg. So that's why it's called parallel entry. So we fly heading of 090. Once we are stabilized in heading 090, we start counting the 1 minute. Once 1 minute passed, we start turning to the left to intercept the inbound leg, but the distance is too tight, so we're going to overshoot. And we try to re-establish back again on the inbound course as quick as possible. And sometimes, if it depends on your speed, if you're too fast, you might find the aircraft establishing. You might find your turn a little bit wider, and you start to re-establish in this position. It is okay, but all you need to do is to as quickly as possible try to re-establish on the inbound course as quick as you can. So that's for a parallel entry. And let me pause and clean the picture, and we'll start working on the final entry, teardrop entry. Okay, so now we look at the final entry, the teardrop entry. The teardrop entry has the smallest sector. So if the aircraft is coming from this direction, which is the smallest sector, it extends from heading of 270 to heading of 200, only about a 70 degrees sector. So this is 180. The direct entry is 180 degree sector. The parallel entry is 110 degrees, and the smallest one is the teardrop entry sector, which is only 70 degrees wide. Now, what do we do if we are in this situation? If the aircraft is coming from here, or if it's coming from this direction, or if we're coming from, if we're coming from this direction, what do we do? How do we get ourselves onto the hold correctly? Well, it's easy. It's not that hard. So it's actually easier than the parallel entry. So let's go ahead and draw the aircraft. Now the first step to do, as always, as in all the 3 legs, all what you need to do is to proceed direct into the Charlie Victor Oscar VOR. So in all, as you have noticed in the direct and the parallel, we have always started our entry by proceeding direct into the station, and same thing here applies to the teardrop. All we need to do is proceed direct into Charlie Victor Oscar. Once we do that, we start a slight turn so that we are 30 degrees. Let me remove the number 70 just for now. Okay. Once we are over the VOR, the second step to do is to fly a slight turn of only 30 degrees. This angle is only 30 degrees for a teardrop entry. So once we fly over the station, we need to turn to a 30 degree difference, a 30 degree angle to the outbound course. Now we know that the outbound course is 090, and we are going 30 degrees anti-clockwise, so we minus, so we fly a heading of 060. So this line here is 060, always a 30 degrees difference from the outbound course. So we're coming from the aircraft is in this sector, goes on to Charlie Victor Oscar. We are now, once the aircraft is over Charlie Victor Oscar, we fly a 30 degree a 30 degrees difference, so heading of 060, and we start counting. Once we're over the Charlie Victor Oscar, we start counting 1 minute, and then 1 minute should be extended. Once we're over 1 minute, we start to turn back to the right, so it's like here, and we intercept the inbound leg without any overshooting this time. So to recap on the teardrop entry, I will just say it again one more time. We are coming from this sector, which is from heading 270 to 200. All what we need to do is to proceed direct to Charlie Victor Oscar, the VOR or the fix that we're going to fly on. And then we fly a 30 degree difference to the outbound leg, so heading of 060. We continue for 1 minute. Once we pass the station, we start our clock 1 minute on a heading of 060, and then once we do that, we start a right hand turn and we intercept the inbound leg. Now the teardrop entry does not overshoot like the parallel entry. The parallel entry, if you remember, we had to overshoot the inbound course. Now this one you don't need to. All you need to do is just if you fly it accurately, you will find the aircraft in 90% of the cases, not all of the cases. Sometimes the winds may play a role that it pushes you into this direction. If the winds are here, then you get closer, so you will overshoot a little bit. But in 90% of the cases, once you finish 1 minute on start turn, you will find yourself exactly on the inbound leg. So, and it's not that hard. It just requires a little bit of practice. So that's the teardrop entry. Let's revise. Let's just summarize all of what we did in this part. Let me clean it up. So let's get this. Okay. Now let's click the number. Okay. Alright. So if we get the text box and write in this for a direct entry. So for a direct entry, step number 1 is to fly direct to the station which is in this case Charlie Victor. In this case it's Charlie Victor Oscar VOR. Once we are over the station, so once over the station, turn to the right for the outbound leg, which is heading of 090. Once we do that, we fly the hold parallel. We fly the hold normally. Once we're over once we're over to the heading of 090 and a beam, we start counting 1 minute, and the hold continues normally. We fly the racetrack. We go into the racetrack as normally and continue turning until ATC tells us otherwise. Now that's for a direct entry. In case of a parallel entry, which lies in this sector, so for a parallel entry, the first step is to fly, as always, fly direct to the station. Once you're over the station, turn fly. Once you're over the station, turn left to the outbound leg heading. So in our example, it is 090. So once we fly over, once we pass the station, we turn immediately to the left to a heading of 090. Once we are stabilized on 090, we start the clock for 1 minute. Once a 1 minute goes by, all we need to do is to turn to the left again to intercept the inbound course, which is in this case 270. And since we are going to be very close to the inbound course, we will overshoot. It's in the parallel entry, it is 99% of the times you will have to overshoot unless you turn very, very sharply to the left. Otherwise you're not going to take it from the first time, so you must overshoot it, or it just happens you will overshoot the inbound leg. So overshoot the inbound leg, but recapture as quick as possible. So recapture as quick as possible. All you need to do is to just as fly 1 minute, turn left, overshoot, and come back, intercept as quickly as possible. That's for the parallel entry. Now on the final, we go to the final one, which is the teardrop. Teardrop is easy for a teardrop entry. As always, fly direct to the station. Second thing is to fly once you're over the station. So once over, all you need to do is to fly 30 degrees difference to the outbound course. So once over the station, fly 30 degrees difference to the outbound course. So in this case, in our outbound course, in our case, it's a heading of 060. So as I instructed, we are gonna fly once we are over the VOR, make a heading of 060. Why 060? Because it is 30 degrees from heading 90, and because we're going anti-clockwise, we minus, so 90 minus 30 is 60. We fly heading of 060 for 1 minute, and we start counting the clock once we're over the station, not once we stabilize. Once we're over the station for 1 minute. And our final once we do the 1 minute in heading of 060, all we need to do is to start turning to the right to intercept the inbound course 270 without overshooting this time. In the teardrop, you usually, not all the cases, but most of the time, you don't overshoot if you fly it accurately. You without overshoot. Alright. So this is a summary of all of the three legs, all of the three entries, and in all turns, it is always a standard rate of turn, 3 degrees per second, or in other words, it's 360 degrees in 2 minutes. And the entries are essential. A pilot must be able to execute all of the entries correctly. In the next part, when we in the final part, part number 3, we are going to be in a multi-engine propeller airplane in flight simulator, and we're going to show you the 3 entries over Charlie Victor Oscar VOR in flight sim. We're going to do the 3 entries using a gauge airplane. If you have a glass cockpit aircraft, it is pretty easy because you can easily visualize where you are in your position. But for a gauge airplane which has gauges, it is a little bit more difficult if you do not have a large imagination. So you need to always have a piece of paper and a pen before you do a hold. And it is not hard, it just requires practice. So practice. So you can easily get it. So I will see you in part 3, where we actually fly the holding itself or the entries of the hold itself. So I pause here and see you in part 3.